Welcome to the Business in UK presentation. In this video, we briefly discuss political, economic, social-cultural, technological, environmental, and legal context of United Kingdom in order to identify how attractive this country is for entering it as a market or an investment site. From space, you can see the two largest of the British Isles, Great Britain and Ireland, as if floating in the Atlantic, 3,000 miles from America and 21 miles from France. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is a country that consists of four co-equal and sovereign nations, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Each of these constituencies, except for England, have their own parliaments and their own slightly differing legal procedures. But whether people living in these constituent countries call themselves Scottish, Welsh, Irish, or English, they are all British citizens. The population of UK is 64.1 million. It is twice as populous as the state of California. England is the most populous of all four constituencies. Old Europe is getting old and fast. Due to a combination of increased longevity and low fertility rate, in 2000, for the first time in history, British over 60 outnumber those below 14. The capital of UK is London, a megacity with 8.4 million residents. The official language in UK is English, but in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, it is both Scottish Gaelic, Welsh, and Irish respectively. Although a state religion exists, it is not mandatory, and religious freedoms exist throughout the UK. UK follows the trend of many other nations, which in recent years have become increasingly secular. The most practiced religion is Christianity, and among remaining religions, Islam is the largest. UK is a parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy. It has numerous political parties, but the major three are Conservative, Labour, and Liberal Democratic. The political party that wins in general election forms the government, and the winning party's leader becomes Prime Minister. However, the head of state is not the Prime Minister, but the Queen, who is also a Commander-in-Chief, a defender of faith, head of Commonwealth, and together with her bicameral parliament represents the third part of legislature. The Queen governs according to the Constitution rather than her own will, and remains politically neutral. The Prime Minister, together with nominated by him 20 senior ministers, is also a member of Parliament, thereby representing both legislative and executive branches of government. The House of Commons is the elected chamber of Parliament. It debates big issues, proposes laws, amends existing ones, and challenges the government's work. The House of Lords is the second chamber of Parliament, made mostly of 92 hereditary peers, bishops, and life peers who are not elected but nominated. The House of Lords scrutinizes bills that have been approved by the House of Commons. According to freedomhouse.org, similar to the United States, UK is a politically free country that allows all citizens who reach the age of 18 to vote directly for their MPs, who have a decisive impact on public policies and accountable to the electorate. Britain is a country of political stability, and the Conservative government has always had a reputation of being business-friendly. It steadily finances innovation and lowered the corporate tax by 1% in 2015.
Since 2012, the United Kingdom Economic Freedom Score has increased, manifesting improvements in 5 out of 10 economic freedom. The UK has developed its economy on a strong rule of law, open trading environment, and advanced financial sector. According to the GDP Index, the UK is the third largest economy in Europe after Germany and France, but the UK GDP annual growth puts it the first among these competitors, though it is significantly lower than the USA GDP growth. Among constituencies, England has the largest GDP and the highest rate of annual GDP growth. The inflation rate is decreasing, reaching 0.1% in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and 0.5% in Scotland. The UK GNI PPP per capita is 70.6% of the USA PPP. Such PPP also places UK behind Germany, France, and all Scandinavian countries. By applying Big Mac Index, we can see that the cost of the Big Mac in the UK is $4.93 as compared to $4.80 in the US. The UK still remains the leading country in Europe with inward FDI of over $37 billion. Although England is the single most important location for FDI into the UK, 2014 saw a resurgence of other constituencies manifesting a much faster FDI growth. The top items on the United Kingdom export list are machinery, transport equipment, manufactured products, chemical products, mineral fuels, lubricants, and related materials. With 74% share of the UK export, England is leading the other three constituencies. Among many others, the UK major articles of imports are nuclear reactors, boilers, machinery and electrical machinery, and manufactured products. England contributes 83.4% of the total UK import. Although the UK is part of the European Union, it still uses the pound and is yet to convert into the euro. The UK has traditionally had a very strong currency, and the public has consistently opposed joining the euro. London Stock Exchange, with a market cap of 3.6 trillion, is the fourth after the New York Stock Exchange, Nasdaq, and the Tokyo Stock Exchange. On the Human Development Index, the UK scores 14th, while the US is the 5th, and the difference in unemployment rate between the two countries is insignificant at 0.2%. What attracts countries to invest in the UK is its quality of life, technology and telecommunications, infrastructure, and stability of social structure. Other differentiators are financing, taxation, support for key industries, and access to highly qualified workforce. When all of these factors come together, as they did in 2013, the UK is able to attract the leading share of investments from major markets.
According to the Worldwide Governance Indicator for Rule of Law, the UK achieves a high rank of 92.9. For investors, this suggests that the UK has an established and transparent legal system, maintains a clear set of laws that are followed, relies on a largely independent judiciary, and boasts strong protection of intellectual property. To some degree, each country in the UK employs a mixed legal system, combining elements of civil law and common law. As a member of the European Union, the UK is also required to incorporate European legislation into UK law and to recognize the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice in matters of EU law. England and Wales have a combined judicial system, while Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own judicial systems. However, despite these distinct jurisdictions, the UK Supreme Court remains the highest court in the UK and final court of appeal for all UK civil cases, and for criminal cases in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Investors must be aware of UK anti-corruption law. On the Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedoms Index, the UK received a score of 76 for freedom from corruption. In 2010, the UK Bribery Act was passed. The Bribery Act is similar to the United States Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in many respects, but there are significant differences. For example, in contrast to the FCPA, which applies only to the corruption of foreign officials, the Bribery Act catches bribes offered or given to any person. Also, the FCPA creates an exemption for facilitating payments, whereas the Bribery Act makes no such exception. On the Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedoms Index, the UK received a high score of 90 for property rights.
The results of 2011 Great British Class Survey revealed a new model of 7 classes, ranging from the elite at the top to a precariat at the bottom, and the other 5 manifesting a rising social mobility between the middle and the working class. However, as much as in the United States, the gap between the very rich and the very poor is widening. Hofstede's cultural typology chart revealed that there are more similarities between the British and American cultures than there are between the British and the French. However, there are some differences. On the power distance dimension, both countries are relatively close in their scores, with the United States surprisingly 5 points higher. Regardless of existing class structure, perception of equality is more natural in Britain. Apparently, there will be a higher expectation of equality in decision-making and slightly less hierarchical barriers, protocol obstacles in UK. Having highly individualistic cultures, both countries scored high on individualism versus collectivism dimension. In both cultures, children are taught from an early age to think for themselves and to find out what their unique purpose in life is. In both countries, the route to happiness is their personal fulfillment. Driven by competition, achievement, and success, both nations scored high on the masculinity index. Though UK scored higher than US, typical American drive to individual achievement seemed less apparent in British culture. It is because the Americans show it up front, whereas British will take you by surprise. Critical to understanding the British is the ability to read between the lines. What is said is not always what is meant. Similarly, Hall's chart indicates that UK is closer to high context culture than US. From this quality comes the implicative mode of British communication. At 35, the British scored low on uncertainty avoidance, which means that they're quite happy to wake up not knowing what the day brings. The combination of strong individualism with low uncertainty avoidance results in a high level of creativity and a strong need for innovation. 11-point difference probably indicates that Americans are ready to embrace innovation, but without British overpowering enthusiasm. The British score of 51 on long-term orientation versus short-term orientation made Hofstede consider its position as undetermined, while the United States scoring 26 apparently belonged to a short-term orientation culture that drives individuals to strive for quick results within the working place. Both cultures scored identically very high on indulgence dimensions. The Americans and the British exhibit willingness to realize their desires with regards to enjoying life and having fun. Both nations possess positive attitudes and have a tendency towards optimism. Let's now look at Trompenaar's typology. The British and the Americans scored extremely high in universalism. Members of both societies adhere to general rules, regulations, and obligations. That is why in both cultures, once agreement is reached and signed, it is not to be further renegotiated. A deal is a deal. On individualism, UK and US both scored lower than on Hofstede's dimension, apparently manifesting recent shifts towards more communitarianist societies. Both countries manifest a certain degree of neutrality. Though the British may not appear terribly animated when they speak, they do experience strong emotions. They merely choose not to put them on public display. If you have insulted someone, his or her facial expression may not even change. It is all about achieving business objective. Being members of specific cultures, the British and Americans tend to keep separately their social life and work. The British will not necessarily give you a tour of their home, and in fact may keep most doors closed. They expect others to respect their privacy. Similarly to the Americans, they place a high value on personal space. On achievement versus ascription, the British score significantly lower than Americans, because they still have a tendency to identify someone by title or status rather than personal achievement. For British, the question where their partner studied is more important than what they studied. However, the situation is changing rapidly. A manifestation of such change, for example, is the House of Lords Act of 1999, according to which all but 92 are not hereditary but life peers, who are now appointed for their competence and profound knowledge rather than their birthright. Since in both cultures people believe in controlling outcomes of their activities and their environment, both cultures are inner-directed. On this dimension, US and UK scored highly, with Britain 5 points below, probably because Americans have a reputation of being exceptionally optimistic, and the British apparently are more realistic.
The UK plays a leading part in the aerospace industry, with companies including Rolls-Royce, manufacturing aero engines, BAE Systems, acting as the Pentagon's sixth largest defense supplier, and GKN, a major supplier to the Airbus project. UK pharmaceuticals have discovered and developed more leading medicines than any other country apart from the United States. Scientific research and development remains important for British universities, with many establishing science parks to facilitate production in cooperation with industry. The future of the UK economic growth will be driven by innovation in 4 key technological areas: advanced materials, biosciences, electronics, sensors and photonics, information and communication technology. Britain gets more electricity from offshore wind farms than all other countries combined. In 2012, it added nearly 5 times more offshore capacity than Belgium, the next keenest nation, and 10 times more than Germany. Britain's enthusiasm for offshore wind turbines is explained by the European law that requires them to generate about 30% of EU's countries' electricity from renewable sources by 2020. For UK, that means about 13% now. The Department of Business, Innovation and Skill and Innovate UK offer businesses to apply for a share of $94.2 million for developing low-emission propulsion technologies that will deliver significant reductions in CO2 or other emissions. The UK air pollution results in 29,000 early deaths annually, and it causes cancer, heart attacks, undeveloped lungs in children. In 2015, the UK's highest courts has ruled that the government must take immediate action to reduce air pollution under European law.
The UK has the lowest unemployment rate since the mid-1970s. It has the 3rd largest economy in Europe, the first among FDI inflows, and a very strong exchange rate. In addition, some of the weaknesses the UK has is a growing gap between the rich and poor, an aging population, a large government budget deficit, and unaffordable housing. The UK also provides a lot of opportunities, including a strong governmental enforcement of intellectual property laws, the least amount of barriers for entrepreneurs in the world, strongest environment for research and development in Europe, and also, UK is just a great place to live. Some of the threats they have is a switch to the euro, uncertainty of the 2017 referendum on European Union memberships, and EU fines for high levels of NO2 and CO2.